Okay, so for this month's serial, where I will go through pictures from last month. First two images are from a lens I was trying. I was testing out the Chroma Double Glass lens, a 24mm f11 pancake cap lens, actually focus-free, made by a small artisan in the United Kingdom. It's a two-element glass lens. Very interesting here. It's on an SL2 body, a Leica SL2, that has some micro prism array on front of the sensor, which enhances the color and overall quality of the image, and for light rays that would arrive at a strong angle on the sensor. So really perfect for this kind of lens. That's very tiny. And yeah, very interesting lens. Got a really great bokeh. It's focus free, so obviously you're in focus for infinity, but very close planes are going to be out of focus, and it's a really soft, nice bokeh. And actually I was very pleased with this lens. It's got pretty good definition, the center part, and good color rendering, and it gets a little bit fuzzy in the borders. You lose definition, but lots of character. Again, two images where the same lens used on an older camera, the Leica M240 camera, and here we see this those magenta lines on top and bottom. And I believe that's the result of the fact that the sensor doesn't have this micro array of lenses, and light rays that arrive at a strong angle will not get into the light pits in the perfect way, and it's going to distort the color. And so, yeah. And also, in those two pictures, just one thing, the picture on the left, even though there's quite some light, it's daylight, but with an older sensor like this one, this lens is really slow. You're basically stuck at f11. So fast shutter speeds are going to be hard or impossible to reach with a good sensor exposition. So yeah, interesting lens, lots of character. Again, two pictures taken with that lens. That month I was trying a few things, and part of it was going to this day organized by the Leica Akademie in Geneva. That was in Vevey, at the Vevey Photo Museum, Museum of Photography, where they organize refreshing courses or discovery courses for film developing, analog film developing. They have all the equipment, the lab. Yeah, it's always a great idea to practice and to refresh your knowledge. Joining groups is super inspiring, and it's nice. It's simply a good experience in general. And yeah, it's independent of your level. It's always great, usually. A great way to meet other people and other ideas, other points of view. I've done lots of film photography before, but that was really a great occasion to refresh my knowledge. And I've developed a lot of film in the past, but haven't done so with enlarging my photos. So that was cool. Very cool. And those two pictures are taken again with the Chroma lens and the M240. But then that workshop was the occasion to use a camera, take pictures in Vevey, and then develop them. And for that occasion, I used my Leica CL. It's this body developed and with the collaboration of Minolta. So the Leica CL is quite a compact rangefinder camera, and that's with the Summerit C 40mm f2 lens, a great lens, really made for that body. And that's using Ilford FP4 125 ISO film. It's a very robust and with very fine grain film. Really nice results with it. And these are two pictures that I took. We were taking pictures in the morning, developing the film, and then developing the enlargements, making the prints. And so two other pictures. Great occasion also to rapidly do some street photography in Vevey. Here are a few graphical elements I took pictures of in the city, just to finish one film pretty fast to go then and develop it. And that's the occasion for this week. I don't do that often, obviously. But just to show the difference between the digitized film on the right, that's the negative, digitized on, I used my SL2 camera with the macro lens and the backlight to have a 47 megapixel scan. And on the left, that's the scan of the paper print. So it's a large format directly from the black and white negative. The rendering is really completely different. And maybe you can do the same by processing digitally using filters and all kinds of simulations, but it's not the same process. And yeah, it's not. Theoretically, you can do it, but it's definitely not the same final result. And it's a bit like, when cooking, I would see it like food when you do that kind of thing. You take an analog photo, it's a first process, and then you add another analog process on top, and you actually make things smoother, you make them different, or you add some body in some parts. And yeah, it's a whole process of adding savor to your picture. Again, two examples which I find quite, one example in two results which I find quite explicit. On the right you have this actually really great negative coming out of this FP4 Ilford film, but the final print using again Ilford multigrade RC Deluxe paper. It's paper where you can, by just changing, it's black and white paper, but by changing the color, the slight coloring of the light source, you're gonna have a more or less very contrasty or less contrasty result on the paper. It's a great paper in that sense. You can have different grades of contrast and rendering, and yeah, very different characteristics between digital process and analog process. I definitely, on the two examples I've showed you, I definitely prefer the final analog print. Going back to some digital, on the left, that's using another cap lens. It's Keks F10 pancake lens, 30 millimeter. It's basically a one-element glass lens taken from made by Kodak that Keks has placed into a plastic cap. Pretty well made. Very interesting rendering, lots of character. The center part is pretty well defined, as much as you could expect for that kind of lens. Less so in the borders, and you definitely have a color transformation in the borders, but lots of character, very interesting. And the picture on the right, it's a self-portrait taken with an infrared lens. It's kind of a mixed bag here. It's I've used it's a Sony DSCF 828. It's a camera that actually can send a infrared light source and do night shots, and it's got a really weird rendering, and so that's what I captured, and I added some filtering on it. It's a selfie, but yeah, I put it here because I didn't really know where to put it. It's not really matière numérique. It's not really digital matter. It's really photography, like normal photography with some filtering. But anyways, I just put it here. It filled it in, and that was part of my months. It's another project, but yeah. Going to the next two pictures, that's again two pictures taken with this Keks 30mm single lens f10. Great lens. I would definitely use this lens in certain occasions, like when I don't have a wide angle with me but don't want to take a cumbersome lens. It's so tiny, so small. It's actually cheap. Same thing, like a bit like the 24mm I talked about before. Yeah, great kind of lens. On the picture on the left, you can actually see this sort of weird color distortion in the borders, but it gives a lot of character to the image. So well used, can give some really good results. Here are two pictures taken with, I was testing the TT Artisan 50mm f1.4 tilt lens. So it's a lens actually that has also rotation. You can tilt the lens without compensation. It's not a perspective compensation lens. It really moves your focal plane, so you can really have those weird creative effects. It tilts maximum of 8 degrees. It's got two screwing elements to lock the rotation or the tilting, and these two were two of my first images with it. So yeah, interesting lens. And again, like I travel a lot again, and it's always the occasion to inspire, to find new inspiration. That's going to Iceland, and that's using the same TT Artisan 50mm f1.4 without the tilt. So on one side, it's actually the plane going fast. I like the rendering of this lens, actually, a bit old school, you know. And on the right, that's actually lots of wind, and you can see the snow that sticks on the side on one side. That's the direction of the wind, well, opposite the direction of the wind. Lots of snow arriving in Reykjavik by night. Here again, that's one of the cathedrals in Reykjavik. Again, this TT Artisan on the left with no tilt. Really interesting rendering, old school but quite precise. A nicely built lens too. And on the right, I was also testing some other lenses. That's a Sigma autofocus 100mm f2.8 art lens. Great lens overall. The art lens series is really great series from Sigma. And that's L mount on an SL2. The TT Artisan I was talking, the one taking the previous pictures, is a manual focus lens. Going to the TT Artisan again, using the tilts, that was the occasion. This trip was the occasion to try to go as far as I could with the tilting of that, really trying to test this lens to its extremes. And yeah, the rotation lets you choose the angle of the focal plane, and the tilt obviously moves the focal plane in some non-central way. And you can really have some interesting thing coming out. So 2 examples by night in Reykjavik. And here, the picture on the left, same thing. You can actually kind of increase the sense of depth by moving the focal plane in the angle of the plane you want in focus, and create increased depth artificially. I don't know if it's artificial, but it's anyways. That's what it does. And on the right, that's again the 100mm f2.8 Sigma art lens. Great lens overall. Again, a picture taken with the tilt TT Artisan lens, portrait mode. A good idea how this kind of gimmick gives you a feel of macro photo, how you can really focus the viewer's attention on what's in focus that will not be at the same distance in all parts of the image like it would if it wasn't tilted. So yeah, that's a slow aperture time, slow opening time. The exposure is quite long. You have some movement, feel of movement, and you have this van in the middle that's in focus. Here's the picture on the right. That's again with the tilt, with the SL2, trying to exploit this feel. And here I'm showing this picture because I also took a picture on the left with a Polaroid Go mini instant camera, and that's X-ray exposed film. So here the main thing is to try to show how much the feel is definitely not the same. You don't express the same things. It really depends on how you take a picture. It's not the same subject at the same time. It's not going to say the same thing if you don't, depending on what film or lens you're going to use. And almost at the same time. It's the Polaroid was taken a few minutes after the one on the right, as you can see, with the shadow, which is slightly moved. But yeah, very different feel depending on what equipment you use. Going back to film, that's an APS film. It's Kodak Adventix 100 expired, used on a Leica CL APS camera. Picture on the left, that's in Reykjavik. It's frozen puddles. And on the right, that's in Oslo, the Oslo Bay, with this really special rendering of those old expired films. I don't think anyone does any APS film anymore. Going back to this Polaroid Go film, some people say that X-rays don't have any effect. It definitely has an effect on instant film from Polaroid. This film has been going through an X-ray scanner at customs when passing the border at the airport. So it's a rather high exposition device, but definitely created a strong veil on the film, which I find interesting. But yeah, definitely you're losing color quality and contrast, and here it's also cold. It was really cold when I took the pictures, but it's a combination. But mainly the X-ray effect is really going to create a veil and destroy your contrast and color rendering. And as you can see here in those two next pictures, same equipment, still the Polaroid Go. The Polaroid Go is this new format from Polaroid, which is smaller, a little bit cheaper because smaller. But yeah, here, no X-ray exposition on the film. So you do have some normal colors, but I'm in a really cold place. And as you can see, cold has an effect. It adds a small amount of color distortion. But here I bent the picture on the left when it came out because I wanted to put it quickly in a pocket. And you actually can see the emulsion kind of getting stuck and creating those fern patterns because it's not reacting well because of the very low temperature. It's probably minus centigrade something. But as you can see, the colors are way better than the X-ray exposed film, and you don't have that as much as a veil. Next two pictures, that's me testing. Last month I've tested this Rollei XF 35 rangefinder camera, and here I'm testing it. It was with color film, and now I'm testing it with black and white film, and that's with SFL Tasma 42 400 ISO film. Really interesting, old school but precise film with lots of range, and on this weird auto exposure aperture system, but that works great. It's a 40mm f2.3 lens, and in low lights, fantastic geometry. This Zeiss lens made by Rollei under a license is great. Again, as we've seen last month, it's part of a review video that's separate. But again, two pictures from that experiment with this new camera, with this camera I hadn't really used before. Yeah, even in very, very low lights, you get some great results. And two last pictures with the same equipment. On the left, it's a detail of a place which used to be, it's in Geneva. The other pictures were in the city of Carouge in Switzerland. And this picture on the left is in Geneva. It used to be the front entrance of a big cinema in Geneva that closed, like many cinemas today. And on the right, that's almost night time with the full moon. Again, this Rollei XF 35 has a really decent way of managing low lights and giving great results. Going to digicam, it's a little bit of a new trend online now, using small digital cameras from the early 2000s. That's with a Leica DXO One. It's a 3.2 megapixel CCD camera, tiny camera, which gives astonishingly good results with flash and when you have good light. There's definitely a distortion. It's kind of convex looking, but really great color rendition and geometry otherwise. Yeah, nice camera. Again, with good lighting, like on the left, you get some really decent images with actually lots of character. And in lower, not as good conditions, like on the right, you will still have a great rendition, but the CCD will show its limits and you'll have some kind of magenta for the compensation, like you see on the left of the picture on the right. And if you push even further with those two images, you really have this particular aspect of not optimally lit CCDs, this magenta look on one side. That's on the left on those two images, but it's actually on the bottom of the camera because I'm turning it portrait mode. But yeah, great, actually really great camera to use. Works well, and it's got to it really is getting closer to film. The boundary is not that clear anymore. It's like using old films. Those sensors really have characteristics that gives them a very special feel, like you would with different kind of films. And I understand this new trend that's of using old cameras, old digital cameras. Talking about old digital camera, those two pictures, I've been messing up with some foveon sensors, those sensors that don't have a Byron filter on top, which are made by Sigma, whereas the colors are, the pixels are one over the other, the color pixels, not one side of each other. Very weird color rendering in low lights. It's not very good in high ISO, but I find interesting the way it renders colors. Definitely different from usual CCDs or CMOS, and that's on a Sigma DP2X. Yeah, and kind of liked those two pictures, found them interesting. And the two last pictures for this month, on the left, that's with a Canon EOS 6D Mark 1, using a 400mm, an old Sigma APO f5.6 TLA lens. You can find them really cheap secondhand, and on this 6D it works great. And I like the ambiance of this picture with those two characters inside this window, standing, and you don't really know what's going on. I like the feel. And on the right, that's using, again, in those, we could put that into the digicam category. It's a DXO One mini camera. It's basically a really tiny camera, smaller than a GoPro. Could be used, I kind of used it like a GoPro when it came out, made by DXO. It was a 1-inch sensor, a great lens, and it was meant to be attached on a phone. It does have a really tiny black and white screen and not grayscale screen. It's really dots that are either black or white. It's a tiny screen that lets you kind of frame correctly, but you have no idea what else is going on. And it works pretty well. The rendering is really good in raw format. And when you add the phone and when you attach the phone on the side, the phone actually serves as a tilt screen, and you can actually preview the software. It was pretty good. I haven't tested it recently with the software and with the external device. It used to work really well, and you had this really big screen and great way to control the camera. But the camera works standalone, and that's how I use it. It's in my pocket, and I'm reusing it right now and testing it for a further review, video review. But yeah, so that was this month's serial presentation. Hope you found it entertaining, a little bit less interesting in my opinion than other months, but that's February, and see you next time.